So the motion on the floor, the House believes that voters cast by youth should have more weightage in national election. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Speaker 1 from Team Proposition Croatia Red to open their case. Start whenever you are ready.
Okay, just checking. I'm audible. Everything's fine. If Brexit referendum was held the moment that Brexit happened and not 4 years before it, the UK would currently still be in the European Union because, well, the older people that voted for Brexit would have already died. Panel. Because in opposition, the principles of democracy, the representation and protection of minorities are not being preserved, and we as the Sava proposition are the only ones that claim them, I'm so proud to propose. Few things that will happen in my speech. Firstly, the debate setup, so definitions, models, our stance in the status quo. Then the first substantive about principle, second substantive about involvement of younger people in elections, and then our second speaker will talk about how more younger people are in power in our third substantive. So let's go through on the definitions. So by the national elections, we believe these are referendums, elections in the parliament, elections for the president and such. By our model, we tell you that youth are the people from 18 to 35 years old. And now how much does their votes weigh in accordance to the other ones? We tell you that every youth cast would worth 1.5 to 2 votes of the elderly. Now let's look at our stance in this debate. What do we believe that the youth want generally? These are much more liberal views, such as environmental policies, LGBT rights, Black Lives Matter, their rights, abortion that is allowed, legalization of soft drugs and similar things, healthcare for everybody and such. On the other hand, what do we believe that the elderly people want are more conservative views, such as they're not as likely to vote that all gay people can get married, that they're not as likely to believe that all people of the same race should be, no thank you, have the same rights. And they are much less informed about everything that is happening about the global warming, and they're much less likely to even believe and to care about these things. And in the status quo, we can see, no thank you, that first of all, we have a tremendously low percentage of younger people within politics itself, such as parties, and even more so, we can see that we have a tremendously low voter turnoff of younger people in politics. And we can see that they are so alienated from the system itself, which I'll talk more about in our substantives. So now I'm moving on to the principal substantive of this debate. No, thank you. We believe that there are two principles in this debate, two principles of democracy. Firstly is the representation, that the policies that are implemented are the ones that benefit the majority and that the majority itself elected. And the second principle is that we believe that is the protection of minority, because they have the fewer power and because over the majority, therefore we believe that principally their democracy at itself should prevent oppression of the majority. Now opposition will probably come here and claim you all about how everybody should be equal. But let's see, by these principles, why on our side of the house it is justified that we have a model that we propose. Firstly, it is because we have a bigger balance. Look, when you turn 18 and you come into the voting world, you do not enter a balanced world. You enter the world that the older people have already established. You enter a world where there are already parties that are in power for 30 years or more, that everybody knows their name, and now you have a much smaller balance between all of these systems. And second of all, we have a more representation on our side of the house because the people that will live up to these results of these elections are the ones that will necessarily be the younger people, the ones that will eventually elect all of these. And I mean, on the example of Brexit, as already explained, the people literally died before they even saw the results of the elections. Such a thing would never happen on our side of the house. So let's see what is the overall impact of all these arguments. Firstly, you have younger people that will elect people that are in power, and therefore there will eventually be this balance between the two balance between the parties that are in power. And we tell you that this is principally more fair because we make the less known and the smaller, newer parties more relevant to know. Thank you. And we kind of abolish this establishment that the people before have already put in place. And second of all, on the principle, we have more people, we have more representation, and people are going to, the people that make the policies are the people that actually voted for them and the people that will feel the results of them. And because we have not only one, but two democratic principles, we win this debate. Before moving on to the second substantive, yes, sure, go on.
Does the proposition think that only liberal people should be allowed to have power of the vote in a democratic state?
No, but we generally see a trend in status quo where younger people are the ones that have more liberal views, that see that online. Therefore, we believe that mostly liberal views are the ones that will be more elected when this thing will be implemented. Now, moving on to the second substantive about involvement of younger people in elections. We tell you that, as already explained, we have such small amount of people, younger people, that are actually involved in politics itself. Why is that so? Firstly, they have no incentive to do it. They're horrified by the establishments, and even more so, they're horrified by all of the people that surround them, by their elderly citizens that are waving their Trump flags and Make America Great Again red caps. And they feel alienated from the society, and they wonder what's wrong. Look, they feel like their votes do not matter. They feel like if they go out, they will not be represented. They will not be, the thing that they want will not be elected, because all of these people that have such views, that have such tremendous power, and that will just push their opinions on the side. So what comparatively happens on proposition? Look, the state now shows these people, we care about you, we recognize you, and we want you to vote for your future. And now, firstly, the youth is not as opposed to the idea of the state itself and the election itself, because literally it showed them, look, we want your opinions, we want you to contribute to the society, we want you to try and make and create your future. But second of all, the youth now knows they have a bit of an upper hand over the good old conservative folks, because, well, the numbers do not lie, they have more power over them. And now, what is the impact of all this? Because of all this, we believe that there will be much more likely that younger people will be in the election process itself. So if, for instance, if you see that your two parents are going to vote for Trump, we tell you that on our side of the house, I will also go out, because I know that my vote will cancel theirs out. And therefore, the candidate that I want to vote for will have much more opportunity and much more likely that he will be elected. And therefore, I'm not feeling as oppressed as I would on the side of opposition, because I would know that my results, my ideas, and the things that I believe would be eventually elected. So why is this good? Well, look, I just remember all the things that these younger people support. So all the progressive policies that I've mentioned to you in the beginning of my speech. And now, not only that, on our side of the house, you have more younger people that are generally involved in politics and that will go out and vote, but you also have their rights weighing more, meaning that it will be much more likely that we have progressive policies on our side of the house. Look, why should you care? We tell you that it is not acceptable for us to even wait a day longer for Black people to gain rights, for people that are gay, that want to be married. We tell you that this has to happen right now. Urgency is here, and we need to implement this, because on our side of the house, you gain this progressive policies that are going to be implemented from the moment that the motion is proposed. Comparatively, the side of opposition on the side of opposition, younger people will never be incentivized to vote. They will always think that the conservative old folks have the upper hand, and therefore they will not have as many progressive policies. Meaning that even if for one day these Black people will still have to suffer, gay people will still not be able to get married. Please, panel, because we as a side of opposition not only enable better progressive policies, but also preserve the two principles of democracy, this motion should be proposed.
Thank you for your fine speech. The speaker has taken 8 minutes and 13 seconds of time. Is our panel ready?
Yeah, I'm
Yes. Yeah.
Right. I'd like to invite Speaker 1 from Team Opposition, Sava, to open their case. Hey, start once you're ready.
Can you all hear me if I speak like this?
Loud and clear.
1 second to set my timer. I will start in 3, 2, 1. Panel, this is not a motion to be looked at and that's going to be seen from the perspective of giving young people more voting power. It's going to be seen as stripping away the power from everyone else, of the power which has been fought since the dawn of history. We think that this is wrong for many reasons, but how will my speech going to look like? Firstly, I'm going to have a few points of rebuttal, then I'm going to have a setup element, and then I'm going to go into my two arguments. Firstly, about the moral importance of voting, and secondly, about the active harms that this is going to bring up on the rest of the population in terms of representations. Entering my first point of rebuttal, we hear this notion that the young people are going to bring upon progressive change. But though we do not hear any kind of mechanism that shows that this is going to be really implemented, they tell us that in the moment that we pass this motion, there are going to be policies for Black people, and that Black people are going to live better lives in that moment. We hear no mechanisms, and we do not hear mechanisms that prove that young people are significantly more progressive. But even if this were true, even if young people are more liberal, we address your POI, which we ask if you would strip away the right of vote for everyone else who is not liberal. And we think that this should not be true. We think that every vote matters and every vote is legitimate. Conservative votes matter as much as liberal votes in a state, based on the principle that which they choose to bring us, the principle of representation for every single citizen on a state. They choose to discriminate against people who do not have the views of liberal people. And we think that the criteria after people choose their politicians are individually established by each citizen, and the state has no say in this matter. Each citizen needs to have the decision process of his vote. But moreover, we don't get that older people can also vote progressive. We do not see any reasons for this to not happen, because they care about their kids, because they are oftentimes progressive. We do not hear any mechanism for which older people are always going to care about, are not going to care about minorities and Black Lives Matter. And thirdly, we're going to tell you that in my argument about how this would actually focus, how this will lead to not focusing on measures, that it will lead to focusing only on the things that these young people want, and that populism will actually increase. Moreover, they tell us about this establishment that these young people have to confront once they enter the political world. We're telling you, yes, you enter that world, but you have the same power as everyone else. You have the power to countervail what has been before you, if this is true. And we're telling you that we accept the measures in which we give young people more representation. We accept things like quotas for young people in the parliament. And we accept campaigns that push young people to understand the power that they have in the system. Like in our country happens, NGO that teach young people the power of vote, teach people how elections work in the parliament and so on. And we think that with this mechanism, we do not need this motion. We do not need this motion. And they tell us that young people are more and more progressive, and we're telling you that solely because of these reasons, because of the reason that young people are more progressive, we do not need to pass this policy in order to get their benefits. We're telling you that the backlash is going to be far worse, and we're telling you that this is not worth doing if we are going to obtain the same change on our side of the house too. Entering now my first argument about the moral importance of vote. We know that the premise of this argument is the state is a very coercive entity, and our vote is the only counterweight we have to this. Why is the state so oppressive? Because you cannot opt out of it, and you are born into it. You do not have any choice on whether you are born. I do not have any choice to be born in my country. I have just been born here. None of us can go against the lottery of birth. We didn't consent to be born into an organized structure of state. We cannot go and live in the mountains or in another place. And why does this state decide? The state decides everything in your life. It decides the laws that you have to obey, and which are controlled by a few minority of people at the top. It controls how much tax you have to pay. It controls what measures are implemented during crisis. It controls the trade with other countries, which means that the food that you are going to get. It controls the housing system. It controls the educational and sanitary system. Our states control whether the coronavirus vaccine is going to be delivered to us fast. And we're telling that all of these things show that every decision of a politician every decision that affects us is in the hands of this politician, and this affects everyone. This affects every citizen of this state, not just the young people. We're telling that you are not allowed to oppose all of this. Even if you disagree with any of the decision that the state says, you're not allowed to oppose it, because the state has a monopoly on violence. Disobedience is punished. If you threaten to disobey, the state has a huge budget and infrastructure that can ensure that this type of disobedience that does not happen. Your freedom is dependent on the police and the military that the state controls. We don't have truly, in the realm of all of this oppression, the only countervailing force that people have is the vote, the only thing that gives them power in a world of so much coercion. And we're telling that this is not a motion to be looked at from the perspective of giving people more votes. It's about stripping away power from the rest of the population. Is about stripping away power in the face of this coercion. In a democracy, this is what we have to respect, and we see that Team Proposition agrees with that they see like respecting the rights of every citizen as equal. What you do through this motion, you discriminate against the rest of the population, against the people over 35 as they want to portray it. And we're telling that what keeps democracy running is people believing in it. It's people believing that the democracy respects the core principle at its stake. And this is a core principle that we have to respect. No, thank you. One second. Especially in the context in which this has been a right that has been fought for centuries. People have died so as all of them have to get this right as final. And Team Proposition wants to strip away this fundamental right. Before entering my second argument, please go.
Well, democracy on your side, young people are democracy because it is failing them all the time, constantly.
I did not hear, sorry, half of your POI, I didn't know what happened, but I still believe that the answer to your POI is that the decisions of the state affect everyone equally, not just the young people. And I'm going to explain in my second argument how this actively harms the rest of the population and how it's going to, and I'm just entering it right now. We don't get the state state control over your life gets enhanced once you get older. You do not have the stamina or energy to change things because you get more risk averse, because you don't have the same stamina to change your jobs on when you are 50 compared to when you are 20, when that is a time predisposition to create changes in your life. Because when you are old, you have a family, you have to take care of both of your parents and of your children. So you have a very little amount of power once you get older, and the power of your vote gets decreased on side proposition. And what is a word on side proposition going to look like? As a politician, you only need to attract the youngster votes in order to win a majority. They tell you that you are going to give 1.5 or 2 votes to young people. This is massive. You discriminate massive against the old people. It's enough to have 5 young people in order to counter, in order to fight 10 older people. And this is going to look like neglecting the older people, neglecting the people after 35, which are a big proportion of our society. We're not going to have in a world in which these people are already neglecting, in a world in which these people have paid taxes all of their life just to have little pensions and small and lack of investment in elderly care and so on. We're talking that we are going to see lack of policies for things that matter for them, like maternity leave. Young people do not know what it is like to be a father or a mother. They're not going to care about all of these measures that are not going to happen on their side of the house, because politicians will only care about votes, will only care about catering the interests of these people and neglecting the rights of all of these people, the rest of the people. We want equal votes on side opposition, and we think that we are going to achieve change on both sides. We do not want to discriminate, oppose.
Thank you for your 5 speech. The speaker has taken 8 minutes and 23 seconds. Is the panel ready?
Yes.
Acharya,
Yeah.
are you ready?
Yeah.
Perfect. So I'd like to invite the second speaker from Team Proposition to continue with their team case.
Okay, just 1 second, please. Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. I would also like my POIs verbally, please. Thank you very much. In the moment when I, as a young citizen, feel completely alienated and that my country is doing nothing for me, is listening to me in no way and no mechanism, this is the time when I am a disadvantaged group that does deserve to have more representation, and thus we will prove to you once again in my speech why the only way to represent everyone is on our side of the house. So a few things that are going to happen in my speech. I'm going to go over the 5 main points that have gone on in this debate so far. The first on principles, the second on progressive policies minorities versus all others. The third on the quality of these policies, and then lastly, shortly about populism and backlash. And after all that, I'm going to introduce our third substantive, which talks about getting more young people into power. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about principles. What's really, really important to understand here and note is that in their first speech, the side of opposition literally not for 1 second touched our principles. So let me just bring it right back. The fact is that we tell you that there are two main mechanisms in democracy, and this is representation and protecting minorities. And we are telling you that if we prove one of these, we prove that our principle stands, and that our principle is more just towards democracy overall, but we will in fact prove both of them. So first of all, let's talk about why from the beginning, young people are actually entering a system that is disbalanced and that is unfair to them. And okay, so the fact is that you are born into a system that has for the past 50, 100, doesn't matter, for so many years has been actually voted on and rigged by these old people. The fact is that these old people are the ones who gave so much power to these old established politicians and their parties. They are the one who gave them all the power, and this is the society that we live in right now. We are telling you that it's so incredibly hard for anybody new to break in any way, that you are born into a system that is already completely rigged, that literally a Republican president can open a book and see how the last 50 Republican presidents have won their elections, meaning that in no way can actually a young voter have more power, or a young person trying to get elected for office or anything else. This is why from the beginning we need to help these people. And the fact is that in the moment when you concede that you are in fact in favor of positive discrimination, that you are in fact in favor of quotas, you concede that there is a problem, that you do want more young people voting, that you do want more young people in parliament. And that being said, right now the debate is actually, the question is who will do this better, who will actually bring more people here. And that being said, we are definitely going to do this. Furthermore, we talk about the second principle of democracy being the protection of minorities, and I'm going to get into how we do that now in the second point about progressive policies. When you tell us that we have no mechanism as to how there will be more progressive policies, literally the most simple mechanism in this debate. It is a known fact, but also proven. Unfortunately, I can't make up the statistics in my mind, but I know that people over 60 were twice as likely to vote against gay marriage. They vote for more progressive policies. Hence, if they have more power of voting, more progressive policies will be voted out. Okay, but the second thing is when you tell us that this isn't just enough to strip anybody of their rights, we're telling you we're not stripping anybody of their rights. Everyone can still vote. What we are doing is equalizing the playing field, because you are born into something that is unjust in the first place. But furthermore, talking about you saying that, okay, but young people will never care about all of these important policies that you talk about in your second substantive. First of all, we tell you that here this is very, very specific to things such as pensions, because I asked you to name me one thing that isn't exclusive to old people besides pensions, but we tell you a few things here actually. The first one being that logically and principally, young people will actually care about this, because just because it won't affect them in the next 5 or 10 years, it will in fact affect them in the long run. Unlike for old people who literally for many of these policies will never ever live to see them, so they really don't care what's going to happen. But secondly, we're telling you that generally young people are in favor of liberal policies and social policies, and thus they will vote for them. But even if we say they don't care, they are uninformed, let's just do a reality check and see that in the status quo, real parties who support liberal things that young people actually vote for are also on support things for old people. So even if the young people give their vote for some other reason, they're still going to vote for a party that's going to do this anyway. Now that I've cleared up that entire point, let me talk about the quality of policies and how it's so much better on our side of the house. So what's really important is to understand that old people will simply don't understand a lot of things. This being digitalization, these being all sorts of new important things, like when there was a referendum on net neutrality, old people don't understand what this is about. Some things like this are not important to them. But furthermore, things like the economy, old people are so much more likely to have a protectionist sort of narrative and so on. And also they're the ones who don't care about a lot of important things, like why would they care about free education and so on. Just saying, oh, they will care about their grandchildren is really not substantiated enough when we tell you that, for instance, in Brexit, they voted to leave also, and they voted against gay marriage. Obviously, they didn't care if their grandson was gay. Now, let me very quickly talk about populism, even though this wasn't properly analyzed in any way. But let me just say that actually on our side of the house, it is so much. On your side of the house, it's so much worse, because the reason why populist parties will appeal to voters in the first place is because they have no way to break in otherwise. They have no idea, and they have no way to grasp the attention of all of these young people, because unfortunately the established parties have so much power. I'm going to talk about that more in my substantive. And let me just also say that the comparative on our side is that in fact now the people, the voters, the established parties will actually have a reason to try to appeal to these voters. Not only the election is so close that they need that 1% of young people who vote, but because they actually care about them. And let me just say that somewhere in your speech there was a word backlash that was never in any way clarified. We don't know what backlash from who, what kind of impact it has. So really not a point that should stand in this debate at all. Having said all that, I proudly move on to our third substantive, which talks about getting more young people into power. Because what we explained to you in our first and second substantive, but before I continue, yes.
Okay, so you're saying that people above 30 don't understand technology and economy and are just going to die after they vote?
I'm sorry, I really didn't hear you.
So you're saying that people over 30 don't understand technology and economy and are just going to die after they vote?
I tell you that people under 35 understand it so much better and so much more likely to care. Okay, now we tell you that in our first and second substantive, we prove to you why more young people will go out and vote, and then we tell you that why will more young people vote and how more young people gain political position. The first reason is because young people hate establishment. This is a known fact, because they feel like they are being it's not working for them in any way. The second one being is that young politicians are more likely to present the politics that they are actually interested in. So of course they will vote for them. And the third one is the psychological impact. Like when I see a woman as a president, I feel empowered. The same will happen here when young people see that that they actually have the power to put young people into power. That will make them feel more relevant and more important. And what is the huge main impact of all of this? It is the fact that we are changing the narrative in society about established parties, because there are two options for them. The first one is to not accept young people who are actually getting chosen now, and for them to form their own parties, which means that now established parties lose power. But the more likely thing that will actually happen is the fact that established parties now have to bring in these young people because they are getting so much vote and so much popularity, which means that we get a balance between these most important parties that most people actually vote for, which means that we have a balance that satisfies everyone, that the biggest parties that have the biggest power now also include young people, and there's a balance for everyone. We are basically moving towards a society that has more discourse between old and young people, and where everyone is satisfied with the policies that are being proposed. Having told you all this, notice that we are the only side that actually protects the values of democracy, and the only side that gets everyone involved and gets better policies for the overall country. Having said all this, please propose.
Thank you for your fine speech. Speaker has taken 8 minutes and 29 seconds. Is the panel ready?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So I'd like to invite the second speaker from Team Opposition to continue with their team case.
Yes, can you hear me? Is it okay? Okay, thank you. And just 1 second to set my timer, and I'm good to go. Panel, this is a motion that actively tells everyone in our society over 35, you are worthless to us from now on. You've lived to where we care about you, and you can now do whatever else you want instead of being politically engaged. It's a motion that tells everyone in our society, unless you believe in, say, progressive agendas, you're worthless and your views don't count. And as much as we ourselves are leftist people and care about progressive agendas, we think that at no point in any democratic society should such a removal of the dignity of the choice that every individual has happened. With that in mind, I'm going to go by this speech in 2 areas. First of all, I'm going to focus on rebuttal, and lastly, I'm going to bring you our third substantive argument about how much backlash this is going to bring into society and how that's going to tamper and affect the ability of these people to lead. But now let's go to the rebuttal. First of all, note their entire first argument, right, about youth not being integrated. Here, there's a very big contention which I have to bring. Note that their entire argumentation in this debate is exclusively based on young people being progressive, right? At the point at which young people in the future are no longer going to be progressive, maybe going to change their views, maybe going to like something else, none of their argumentations about minorities and LGBTQ rights stands, right? Their only substantive analysis and their only mechanization in this debate is contingent on them thinking about how these young people are going to vote. There's nothing principled about this any further. But more than that, note that they tell us about how this minority no thank you of young people is actually very stripped away, actually now has to face a big establishment, and is actually their vote don't count properly, right? We think that they neglect to see the other side of the coin that's going to happen in this debate, right? When they apply the motion, what they do is that they shed light onto the young people, but they're going to actively lose everybody who's over 35, right? So they talk about these principles, right, of representation and about minorities, but what they fail to see is that on their side of the case, you're going to have far lesser representation, right? Because everybody under 35 is going to have their voting weight halved, right? Their vote is going to be not as legitimate, right? But more than that, know that we think that you lose the engagement, that losing the engagement of all of these older people, and know that these older people are not just 65 plus, they're 35 plus based on their actual model, is not only immoral and anti-democratic, but more than that, we also think it's counterproductive, right? We think that the way to actually push for change in the society is not to force progressive ways onto the rest of the society, progressive things that the youngsters say, but rather convince the rest of the society that they are the proper things, so that when they get to exercise their vote, everybody can vote accordingly. More than that, let's talk about their principle for representation, right? And Tanya explains to you that our issue with politics and the issues we all have with politics, which I think we can agree, or which are things we can all agree on, right? Not enough people are actually engaged. They have a massive problem-solution mismatch on their side of the house, right? They believe that the only way to get young people integrated in politics is actively stripping away the weight of the vote from the elder ones, right? Tanya explains to you from the first minute of her speech how there are several things you can do which are already happening, right? You can have massive quotas which don't lead to such a massive amount of backlash. And why is that? They don't lead to such a massive amount of backlash because no, thank you. You're not actively stripping away the ability to vote or the thought that their vote counts for more than 2/3 of the population, right? The backlash is going to be much minimal, and you can achieve all of the things that they talk about through other means that are less prone to open you to a lot of contentions. But more than that, note that it's much likelier that youngsters, know that it's extremely crucial. They tell us youngsters are also going to vote for the rest of the society because they know that they will also grow old sometimes. Two responses here. Note that people are usually extremely short-termist, right? They don't exactly care about, and they don't exactly grasp what exactly is going to happen in like 30 years or 40 years. They want the things that they care about right now, right? And secondly, note that people are usually extremely selfish, right? Nobody cares about the pension of the person that's 60 because they can't empathize with that person, right? There's a massive experiential and empathy gap that happens. So it's very likely that these people are not going to vote in the interest of like the entire society, and they're not going to be able to, as Proposition 18 claims, properly no thing to represent society. So note Tanya's entire argument about how relevant it is to have people actually vote for themselves in their own interest still stands in this debate, right? Because these people do not have the capacity to vote for everybody. But more than that, let's talk about the establishment, right? Which is a point that they massively massively flag in this debate, right? This establishment is so extremely bad. Guys, the establishment is not written in a stone and put on a statue, right? Of course, these people will have to face the past. That's how history works. People come before you, they take decisions, and then once you have the ability to vote, you can bring a more progressive way. You can sort of change the perspectives of society, and things will change. Right? And plot twist, these youngsters with their progressive views will also become the next establishment in the future, right? They will also themselves be prone to attacks from the new youngsters, right? So none of the things they're talking about the establishment actually make any sense in this debate. The way to change the establishment is by changing the social norms. Again, note that all of their entire argument third about bringing more youngsters to politics is literally solved by our alternatives. But before any PRI, yes.
Okay, why is it principally just by quotas to take away the rights of older politicians, but it's not principally just to take away the rights of older voters by our model?
Okay, first of because quotas don't have such a drastic effect on each individual in the society, right? Quotas are strictly about like power structure inside politics. Not every individual harmed by society is going to have to abide by them, but also it is extremely relevant to understand that they won't have the same visceral effect within people. Note our entire first argument, right, about why voting matters so incredibly much. That's extremely relevant in this case, because that's the only counterweight people have for the society. But more than that, note that it tells that old people don't really understand what they're talking about and what technology is, right? Guys, our brains are not mechanized or conservative, evolved, democratic. If young, we think there are many exceptions to that. But more than that, we say they can be educated by the youngsters, and that should happen. But more than that, we say it is completely legitimate to vote in your own interest, right? If you care about keeping the economy conservative and you still live in their country, it's legitimate to keep it. Now, about that backlash. Look, the premise of this argument is that the distrust in the legitimacy of the elected leader and its effects of a society will be huge, right? Note, people care a lot about their votes, right? They're interested in the political apparatus more when they get older because they've experienced for a far longer time how much power it actually holds upon them, right? In many countries, it is people over 35 that have actively fought for their democracies. And democracies are barely settling, right? They have fought for them through communism, and they care deeply about this vote. The motion will make them feel extremely neglected, right? It will be portrayed by the media, who is extremely sensationalist, as you will see headlines everywhere as your vote no longer counts if you're over 25, right? People over 35 will feel extremely viscerally about this because they will feel like their democracy has failed them and their voice is no longer powerful. Effects: number one, voter turnout in these demographics will decrease massively. You create political apathy within them, and it's no longer worth it to go vote because youngsters will decide anyway. We think that system is a system more similar to communism and democracy, and we shouldn't strive towards that. But second of all, targeting the legitimacy of any elected leaders, right? All of these people over 35, they're going to say that leader doesn't actually represent the majority, it's an elitist leader, right? So this leader won't have the trust of the population, right? It will have to focus more on explaining themselves, explaining their legitimacy, taming down opposition attacks, rather than actually pushing forth the progressive policy that they would want to keep, right? It taints their efficiency and credibility in pushing forth their political agenda when they constantly have to tame down their opposition. For all of these reasons, I'm so glad to oppose this motion.
Thank you for your fine speech. Speaker has taken 8 minutes and 14 seconds of time. Yes, is the panel ready?
Yeah.
Right. I'd like to invite the third speaker from Team Proposition to continue.
Am I audible to everyone? Thank you. That's great. We need to shake the system down to its core. What we've been telling you throughout our 2 previous speeches is that the system was rigged against the young people for centuries, and it's gonna keep being rigged against them if we change it principally. We tell you that the only way to actually balance out the power that young people and old people, the establishment, have is to actually give more power to the young. Let's talk about the setup of this debate and why strategically the side of opposition is losing it right now. First of all, they just didn't decide which strategy are they going to take. They are quite not sure, firstly, if people are liberal or not when they are young. By this, they sometimes tell you, well, they are not progressive, but then they are extremely progressive. So these 2 rebuttals mitigate each other. Second of all, they did not characterize well if people, when they are voting, are selfish or not. Because we tell you, if young people are always selfish and vote against old people, this also means that old people never care about what young people wish. That is climate, that is racism, there are all other policies. Now, before I get into clashes, let's talk about what policies what are the policies about which young people care. What we tell you is that those are like progressive policies. This means gender equality, equality of races, but also things like unemployment policies, employment policies, free healthcare for all, free education for all. And we tell you that we see this in the status quo by the FFF movement, the BLM movement, Me Too movement, young people voting for Bernie Sanders, who actually fights for free healthcare and free education. Those are the policies that actually make sure that these young people can get employed in the future and that they can be protected by the states. These are not only liberal policies. Now let's talk about the principle in this debate. We tell you that if we prove the principle, it works regardless of what our young's preferred political orientations. Firstly, we tell you that the democracy influences your entire life, and we both agree on this in this debate. This is why everybody has to have the equal impact in the democracy. Now, the question of this debate is, where are people actually equal? The side of proposition tells you that you are equal only if you are equal on the paper by having one vote for everybody. But we tell you this is not quite true. You're actually equal by firstly having equal influence on election outcomes and policies, and plus by having proportionate impact of these policies in your life and feeling them equally or more based on the input you had. The side of proposition tells you you cannot opt out of being born in the state. Well, we tell you you cannot opt out from being born in rigged system, and the system is rigged. Firstly, we tell you that the system is rigged against young people because they enter a game which is already established and biased against them. This means that laws are made, policies are made, established policies are built. I'm sorry, am I audible? Okay, you have huge media coverage for established parties. Presidents in the United States are traditionally 60 years old, and when Obama is 45, we tell, oh, well, he is young, that's so great for us. We tell you that once you are a young person and actually wish to elect a policy that will benefit you, it is called a liberal policy. It is a new policy. You don't only have to vote for it, you also have to persuade a majority of old people to actually vote for it too. We tell you that we balance this out by actually giving 2 votes for people who are young, who still enter this game very disadvantaged, who still are a minority here as opposed to other people from the age of 35 to 80 or so. And this is the way how we balance this. Secondly, we tell you that we have the principle of representation working for us on our side. We tell you that young people suffer so much more from the policies that are being done in a status quo than the old people do. Because we tell you, when old people don't care and wish to drive their oil-fueled cars because it is more convenient for them, we tell you that young people are going to be the ones that will see their children dying from the actually impact of climate change and global warming. We tell you that this is example how actually, no, thank you, policies that are being done now are going to be so detrimental in the future that even if then young people get their chance to vote and change something, it will be too late. We tell you that the UK will never come into EU again, or at least it will be so late in decades to come that it will actually destroy lives of generations of young people who will not be as employed and as benefited by the perks of EU that they could have been if the old people didn't vote for getting out of the EU. Thirdly, we tell you that actually young people sacrifice their rights for so much longer amount of time than actually the old people. The opposition tells you, well, everybody sacrifices their rights. Well, we tell you, yes, but young people will sacrifice their rights for 60 years to come. This is the reason why the policies that are going to be made for 60 years to come have to benefit them. This is the reason why we actually win the principle, which is the main point in this debate. Now let's talk about alienation and backlash from the old people. Firstly, we tell you old people will vote because they have a tradition of voting. They don't feel betrayed by the system right now. This is just their habit. Secondly, we tell you, why would the backlash happen? Why is there not a backlash against quotas? Why would that happen in such a big impact? But secondly, we tell you that when we gave women rights, we also stripped 50% of the power from men. But right now we are quite happy for it. Why? Because women were disadvantaged, because the system was rigged against them. And finally, we are right now, all of us, both men and women, happy with it because we recognize it as fair. Why wouldn't it happen on the side of proposition? We have never heard an impact. Thirdly, we tell you that much more important point in this debate is the voter turnout by the young people. That is currently so low because young people feel betrayed by the system, because it is rigged, because they say we have no power whatsoever. If every time is elected a candidate that is 70 years old, that is supported by millions of corporate lobby, that is funded by old people, by their old parties, I cannot make an impact. We solve this in two mechanisms. Firstly, by saying we care, we as a state care about you, and we give you a chance. Secondly, by showing that you actually have some power. This was never rebutted. And now let's talk about policies. Firstly, we tell you that when they tell you, well, young will be establishment in the future, this is kind of not true, because then the young people currently will be old in the future. So every time a young generations makes their own world again. Secondly, about the policies for old people, we tell you that firstly, young people don't quite so much care, so they would love to strip the old people out of their rights. Secondly, healthcare and pensions are something that is supported by the young people. We see it on the example of support to Bernie Sanders, and it all benefits old people. Old people are ones who are severe capitalists who don't understand the perks of social policies. Thirdly, we tell you that actually these policies actually need some time to be made, so they will not affect the old people's lives as soon as possible. Fourth point about the progressive policies. We tell you that these are so important. These are literally rights of different races, of women, of gay people. And we tell you that we cannot, as a state, allow their rights to be stripped, or at least not give a chance for a change to be made in the favor of these people. So we tell you that actually these policies will be good and will be benefiting the minorities, the disadvantaged groups who should be protected by democracies in the first place. Now onto the point of representation overall. Firstly, we tell you that we have more young parties because young people have more power to vote them out with 2 votes. Secondly, we tell you that actually the establishment takes young policies into consideration because they want to encourage a discourse between young and old and stay in power. Thirdly, on the point of populism happening right now, no, right now populism is happening towards old people because young people are simply not important for politicians. On our side, we care both about young and old people because their power is balanced. This is the reason why we have fair policies and fair representation and democracy. Thank you so much. Please propose.
For your fine speech, speaker has taken 8 minutes and 19 seconds of time. Is the panel ready?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I would like to invite the third speaker from Team Opposition to continue.
Yeah, sure. If you could just give me a couple of seconds, it would be great. Am I audible in the meantime? Just to check that. Okay, great. And there's some background noise. I hear it, but I don't think you can hear it. Is it fine if I speak like this?
It's fine.
Okay, great. Sorry for taking this long. I'm going to start immediately. Okay, setting my timer. I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1 now. What keeps people's trust in democracy is the fact that in spite of the inequalities and the constant infringement upon our livelihoods that we face every single day, this ideology provides us with absolute inviolable values which protect our most basic and indispensable rights. Madam Speaker, the right to vote is the most fought for tool of achieving equality, and Team Proposition wants to take that away from people over 30, from the majority of society. We believe that is completely unjust. We believe that it will harm the society in irreversible ways, and that is why we oppose. I'm going to have 2 main clash points today. We're going to talk about principles, and lastly, we're going to talk about policies and on which side of the case are actually people better off in terms of the policies which their politicians adopt for them. But now let's talk about principles. They tell us that if they prove representation in society, they win. But at the same time, their third speaker comes and tells us that to balance the power young and old have, we give more people to the young. Well, I believe this affirmation is nonsensical with their entire case philosophy, right? Equal representation is contingent on equal votes, on equal responsibilities, on equal opportunities, and on equal access to making sure that you are part of the decision-making process in your society. Note, Mrs. Speaker, that if you gave white people over people of color twice the vote, if you gave men over women twice the vote, if you gave old over young twice the vote, we would call this blatant discrimination, and we wouldn't even be debating this today. And I believe this is exactly what they're doing with this motion today. And their analogy on men and women is absolutely silly. And even more than that, the case of the side of the house, which again protects complete equality, is our side, where everyone has the right to vote. No, their side, on again, there is a disproportionate amount of power for a certain category in the society. Second point about protection of minorities. Again, the premise of this point is contingent on the fact that youth is progressive. But we're telling you that this is not a given fact. They cannot just come here and tell us that the youth, that every single young person, every single person under 30 years is progressive. Show us no statistics, no mechanism, and just expect us to believe them, right? There's still conservative communities in which these peoples are brought up. There's still people who have racial biases, because, Mr. Speaker, sexism, racism, and homophobia don't discriminate based on age. No, thank you. But even if they were conservative, even if all people in the society were conservative, let's get you to our point of one of the most important points of rebuttal, which has had no interaction with, about the fact that there is no such thing as a wrong vote. The criteria upon which I base my vote are not the state's business, and are not, definitely not, Team Prop's business. If I believe in a candidate, if his policies suit my situation, if I simply like them, or I genuinely trust them with my vote, or I think that they're the least bad out of the candidates, then I have every single right to vote for them. Them telling us that this criteria is illegitimate is again a false, no thank you, is a false narrative, and it plays into the fact that certain people in society are superior to others, and we believe this is again a huge infringement upon the democratic principles in which we so believe, which we so direly defend in our everyday debates, right? They tell us that only liberal people should vote. That's what their ideology translates into. That people who believe in certain things, people who believe in left-wing ideologies, should have superiority in society. But, Madam Speaker, they are actively stripping away the power of the majority of society, but without making any change, no thank you, on the responsibilities or on the suffering which is still being inflicted upon them, right? You're stripping away these people's power to vote while still making them subject to the everyday fatal oppression that we have talked to you in our first argument. Again, let me reiterate what we've been telling you throughout this debate, that people are subject to statal oppression. Every single one of them. The state dictates where we work, how much money we make, what education we get, our safety and our liberties. And we believe that it is it is of the utmost importance to give everyone in society the counterweight to this decision making process. And the only counterweight is the vote, because we only can combat the monopoly the state has on violence, the monopoly it has on our liberties, by having the possibility to choose the people who are making choices for us. And then it's about our second argument, who proves to you that people over 30, people who have other perspectives upon life, people who have other sufferings and other needs, will be unattended, will be neglected by society. We've told you that politicians only care about votes. No, thank you. Give this, put this motion into society, and they will significantly reduce the policies and agendas which suit people over 30, right? Because now you give them the incentives to fight over the voter basis of the youth. So this means that there will be a significantly relaxation in policies such as that catering to the needs of parents, for example, education costs for families with children, for the needs of families, for the needs of sanitary systems. Plus, they're telling us that again, no, sorry, I'm going to talk about the point in which they tell us that the youth also cares about the needs of people over 30 in my second class point, to which I am getting right now, about policies. But actually, before getting to that, yeah, POI.
The difference is old people will never be young again. The young one will be old, which is the reason why they don't want to screw up their future being old.
Okay, thank you. But okay, fine. We have told you that young people don't have the same dependencies, don't have the same things keeping them down and anchoring them into society. They don't have families they need to cater to. They don't have again they're not as risk averse as people over 30. They have much more stamina, they have much more energy. So therefore, also they think most of them short term, they have possibilities of moving throughout the state, of changing their career. So because they have all these possibilities, they don't cater into the needs of the old. I'll talk about that later. Okay, so policies. Their portrayal of people over 30 is very flawed because Mr. Speaker, they are not half-wits or brainwashed right-wing radicals, right? They are people who understand the economy, who understand technology, who understand the impact of climate change because they're actively seeing it right now. And they have incentives to care, right? Because first of all, it's false that people over 30 will die after they vote. They've been telling us with Brexit. Brexit wasn't voted by 80-year-olds. And also they have children, they have families that will be impacted by these policies, so they have incentives to fight for them. About the rigged game, Mr. Speaker, elections happen every 4 years, referendums even more often. The notion of a rigged system is contingent on having a system built by people who are now in their 80s without having the possibility to change. Establishment goes away when people vote it out, and they are voting it out right now. We're seeing it with Biden, we're seeing it with Tsai Ing-wen, we're seeing it with Arden, we're seeing it with Macron, right? And all these things happen without their harmful policy. Last thing about alienated people, young people for which we're not doing enough. They already have the means of voting. We should not, the last thing we should do is give them more power and give them a recompense for their lack of political involvement, right? They have narratives which help them, which catering to them. The state always talks about the future of the system. They have movements of voter mobilization. They have the vote. They should use it. They're using it. I'm very proud to oppose.
Thank you for your fine speech. The speaker has taken 8 minutes and 19 seconds of time. Is the panel ready?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So I'd like to invite the reply speaker from Team Opposition to end
Thank you so much. Am I audible?
Right.
Panel, we as humans, all three of us, like progressive policies. We as humans are leftists, and we'd vote pro-aggressive addressing climate change and pro-LGBTQ rights. But panel, a system in which you inflict beliefs and policies on the people around you, no matter whether those beliefs are good or bad, or whether we see those beliefs as nice for us in the future or not, is a system of dictatorship, is a system that is as far away from democracy as it can get. Right? In the status quo, everybody has the vote, and everybody can use their beliefs to change the society into the direction that they want to. That should be the most important principle in the society, and we think we've proved that throughout all of our speeches today. I'm going to go by this debate by noting their points and explaining why they don't stand, and then focusing on what we've brought you in this debate. But firstly, note that their entire case is contingent on how liberal young people are, right? Firstly, we've explained to you how it doesn't matter how liberal you are when you have the vote, and you should have the vote. But let us ask, and you should ask the proposition team, if roles were reversed, if youth were conservative, ask the proposition team, please, if they would still support this motion. Because none of their analysis stands if, say, a societal trend or a societal pattern actually changes, right? And at the point at which they have no clear mechanisms or statistics to prove up that young people are always going to be progressive and that young people are clearly progressive rather than just things they've heard or patterns that they hope we buy, we think their analysis cannot stand in this debate. Then they tell us this weird principle of representation, right? And they make this analogy about how when women didn't have the vote, they were unequal from men. Well, of course, but we've solved that problem. And as Theodora points you on our third speaker, that's a silly analysis to bring, because that's an analysis in which there wasn't equality, right? We've explained to you how there their entire analysis about representation rests on the assumption that there is this establishment that somehow cannot be changed, whatever happens, right? That people have voted 40 years ago and that never is going to change, which is absolutely untrue. And as we've explained to you, elections happen every 4 years. And the way you get out of the establishment is rid of the establishment is by simply voting it out. We've explained that there's no layer of inequality that you actually have. There's no problem that they're trying, that they're tainting in front of us that we're trying to solve. But most of that, note that their entire rest of the analysis in this debate, as we've pointed out to you, about minorities and LGBTQ people being much greater and about young people being much more represented, can be solved through other ways, right? Note that all of their policies and all of the good things that can happen to society, we've explained to you, can happen on our side of the case through a more incremental change rather than just pushing for a policy that strips away the right to a proper democracy of like over 2/3 of society and that has incredible backlash, right? Now, what have we explained to you in this debate? First of all, we've explained to you how the state is an entirely coercive system, right? You don't have any way out of it, right? You can't oppose it. You can't really move to the mountains and live there happily ever after. You have to live where you were born because of the lottery of birth. And how important the vote is right then and there, right? How important it is to feel that you have a say in where your life is going to go in a world in which everything you do is dictated by a greater power, which is the state, and how harmful it is to strip that away. We've explained to you about how these young people are never going to account for the 2/3 of the majority, which are going to be the others. They're incredibly selfish, as is our human nature, right? And how you're actively going to inflict a lot of harm on these people that are older, not older than 65, not older than 40, older than 30, 35, as they state on their model. But lastly, note our entire third argument about backlash on politicians, about how their legitimacy is going to be questioned, and about how at times not even their progressive policies are going to be able to pass. Not really a lot of interaction with it on all of these accounts. We've won this debate. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your fine speech. Speaker has taken 4 minutes and 5 seconds of time. Yes, is the panel ready?
Yes.
Okay, great. Just checking if everybody can hear me.
Yes. Ms. Machavi, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Sorry.
Perfect. So I'd like to invite the final speaker of the round to close this debate, reply speaker from Team Proposition. Hey.
Radical issues require radical solutions. And when the side and the group who actually is going to live in the state for the longest period of time is not being represented in any way, it's clear who takes this debate. Okay, first thing that I want to point out is a huge contradiction in the entire strategy of the side of opposition on which we win alone. The fact is that they concede that this is in fact an issue. They concede that they want more people to be involved through positive discrimination and quotas. And then when I asked them in a POI, so why is it okay to principally take away the right of these politicians who will now not get into parliament because young politicians are getting in? Your answer to this is because there's a smaller impact. So that's exactly what the problem is. The impact on your side is so much smaller by this policy. If you accept our principle, which you do if you want this, that means that the only thing you're doing is having this done in such a smaller manner that really makes absolutely no sense. And we can see that only on our side of the house, we are making an actual change here, and things are actually better for young people, both the voters and the people in power. Now let me move on to the 3 main points in this debate. The first one on principle. You tell us that there is a contradiction in our case because we strive for equality, but now we don't want everyone to have equal votes. Throughout our case, literally every speech gave a detailed analysis as to how these people are disadvantaged, as to how the system is rigged. And we are telling you that just like you tell us there is no way to opt out of being born in the state, yes, there is no way to opt out of being born in a state that is in fact rigged and based on establishment. So let me put this really, really simply. When you have one vote, as these older people have, but with this one vote, you have all the money, all the funds, all of the history, this and popularity that your party has, that is equal to having 1.5 or 2 votes for a young person. We equalize the playing field. We make it more just for everybody. That is the principle on our side, which we have consistently proved and which was literally never ever touched. Now let's talk about progressive policies, where the first thing I'd like to do is the reality check. We didn't make up in our minds that young people are leftists. This is literally a trend all over the world. But even if we take you on your highest ground, we are telling you that the reason why we want these policies is not because they are progressive, but it is because young people want them, and young people are the ones who are going to live with them for the next 40 or 50 or 60 years. And we are telling you that even if all young people were conservative, this would still be okay on our side, because the most important principle here, which you never tackled, is in fact who will suffer in these things the most. The fact that environmental change will not kill my grandma, but it will kill me, and and everything else that young people strive for. Okay, now having said all this, let me move on to the quality of policies. And let me actually talk about the fact how you never wanted to address, and the only thing that you actually wanted to talk about is, oh, but you're just saying they're progressive, that's a claim, that's a claim, that's a claim. It's not. Let's talk about things that aren't just talking about minorities and such. Let's talk about the economy. Let's talk about digitalization. Let's talk about things like free education. These aren't things that matter if you are conservative or progressive. These are things that matter if simply you were born in a time where a laptop was in front of you or wasn't in front of you. This is simply about the time if you were educated and if you care about how much university is going to cost, if you're actually going to go to it next year, or if you are not. So you can never claim that old people will care about this enough. And then lastly, when you have that little point that never literally came out anywhere except in Op 3 about old people not being able to protect themselves because they don't have stamina and energy, if I understood correctly, we're telling you that comparatively they have the establishment of the entire state behind them, and we think that that is better than being able to stand up faster, which is what the comparative is between young people and old people on your side. Because on our side we strive for equality in democracy, and because everyone's votes can finally count, I have never been more proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank you for your fine speech. The speaker has taken 4 minutes and 12 seconds of time. So this is the time to